Spencer, can you hear me?
Hi there. I can hear you just fine. Jim, how are
Great.
you?
We're not even to run the introduction. I'm good. Everybody, you're watching Jim Peters Tonight. I'm Jim Peters. On the right screen there, that's Spencer Morrison right there, author of Reshore. And this is our episode number 262, and it's Tuesday night, July 15th. Spencer tried to come on earlier, and we had a little technical problem, but here we are, and it's working. The internet works. Thank Al Gore.
It looks good to me. It looks good to me.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing very well.
Where are you?
I'm broadcasting here out of beautiful Alberta.
Oh, are you Canadian?
No, but I live in Alberta.
That's cool. That's very cool. I spent a year in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and it was cold.
I've never been out that way, but yeah.
top of Lake Superior. Yeah,
it gets cold here too. Don't worry about that.
All right, so let's talk about your book. First of all, I get the impression you are not actually a trained academic economist, right?
No, sir. Trained as a lawyer.
And why did you decide to write this?
So this is something that I've been working on for the last 11 years. I've been writing about the topic. And really, the book is a culmination of the last decade's worth of research on this subject. A lot of the stuff that's talked about in the book is based on original research. We're talking about economic history, stuff you're not going to find in mainstream sources. So really, it's a passion of mine that I've been working on for a really long time.
I've decided that recently I've come to the conclusion, and I'm assuming I did not read your book, my apologies, that your book is about the fact that tariffs are actually a good thing. I just came to the realization about a couple of weeks ago that in 1900, McKinley basically did the same thing Trump is doing, and it worked out fabulously. And even then, the economists said it wasn't going to work either.
Yeah, I know. They've been saying the same talking points for 200 years.
Yeah, why? So why do they keep saying that?
Yeah, I mean, it really all goes back to this theory of comparative advantage that was come up with by this guy. He was an English economist by the name of David Ricardo. He wrote this book called it was on political economy and taxation. And in the book, he outlined this theory called comparative advantage. I don't know if your audience is familiar with it, but it's the economic theory that countries should specialize in making things that they're sort of relatively good at making, and then trade for the things that they're relatively bad at making, even if that country is better in absolute terms at making everything. That's sort of the economic theory that underpins global free trade, and it was trotted out actually in the middle of the 1800s in Great Britain, and that's where it really found its forte. Great Britain became the world's first sort of free trading nation. This is in direct contrast to the United States of America, which at the time actually had the highest tariff rates in the world. And what's actually very interesting about that time period is that shortly after Great Britain embraced this free trade mantra, their economy was hollowed out. There was large capital outflows from Great Britain as they invested all over the world, including in America. And of course, we know what happened historically. Great Britain's industries were overtaken by first the United States and then by Germany. France caught up to them, and the gains that were provided by that industrial revolution were squandered. And we've seen sort of the same thing happen over the last 50 years in America when we embrace this global free trade mantra in the 1970s.
Well, and also then there's NAFTA, the 1990s, and I've come to the conclusion, at first I didn't think so, but now in my old age, I've come to the conclusion that was actually a disaster. Is that what you think too?
NAFTA was a complete and utter disaster.
Yeah,
it was a complete disaster, and not just for America. It was actually a disaster for Canada as well, because you have to remember, pre-NAFTA, you had bilateral trade agreement between the United States and Canada. The two economies were obviously very well integrated and relatively equivalent in terms of economic development and regulatory burdens. And then they added Mexico into the mix, and Mexico was the odd man out. The reason for that is that, obviously labor was significantly cheaper in Mexico. Environmental regulations, labor standards were not as high. And as a result, there was a lot of capital outflow from America and Canada into Mexico. which resulted in the offshoring of factories, the offshoring of jobs. I think NAFTA in particular, they do estimates now about 800 to 900,000 net jobs lost in America because of NAFTA.
Yeah, well, there's two competing theories, and I don't know the names of them, so forgive me, about the fact that on the one hand, by outsourcing the labor, you make stuff cheaper, and Americans can afford to buy more stuff. But then the conflicting theory, which I think is the one that you are espousing, and that I'm increasingly starting to buy, is that by keeping the labor here, although the goods are more expensive, we basically have more money. And there seems to be I don't know what that economic theory is called. It's basically that it all comes down to revenue, and the higher the revenue, basically everybody benefits no matter what. Do I got that right?
Yeah, I can actually explain that, and I think
please do. That's
yeah,
why
I'm
here.
happy to explain. That's the whole point of the book. Actually, it's all about how the
point of
economy
the
works.
interview.
Well,
hey, Spencer,
let me explain
do
it.
your friends call you Spence, or what do they call you?
Yeah, Spencer is
okay,
fine.
Spencer's
Yeah,
good?
call me
Okay.
Spencer.
All right. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so let me explain how all this works, okay? Because economics, it's complicated. There's a lot of competing theories, like you've said, right? So there is this theory that when you offshore the production of goods to foreign countries that are cheaper, those goods are going to flow back into America. They're going to be cheaper, and we'll be able to consume more. And that sort of makes sense on the face of it, right?
Yes, it does on the surface. That's why I was originally bought it on the surface. It makes sense, right?
Yeah, it makes some sense. The problem is that we're dealing. People don't really think about, how we're purchasing these goods. Now, that economic theory sort of makes sense if you imagine that you're trading production for production. So when you're trading goods and services for foreign goods and services, of course you want the cheapest goods and services, right?
Yeah.
The problem is that the time horizons in international trade are not only in the present. We can also trade production that was made in the past, so assets, and we can also trade the promise of future production, which are debts, right? So I'll give you an example. A house that was built in 1974, it doesn't increase the GDP today, but it does retain value, right?
Right.
It's an asset. The same thing with shares and stocks, stocks and companies. You have all these shares of companies, it's ownership in a company that was maybe set up even 200 years ago. It still retains value today.
Yeah.
So the problem really is that Americans are able to trade assets and debts in exchange for foreign goods. And this is what's happening when we have a trade deficit, right? We're buying more than we're producing. We're consuming more than we build. And we're paying for that by selling off assets and by selling off debts. And what this actually does is it shrinks the economy. Because if we had a closed system, we would have to produce everything that we consume, obviously, right?
Right.
If we're not building it, we can't use it. But by opening up the sale of assets and the sale of debts, we can trade those. We can trade the past, we can trade the future in exchange for stuff today, which means, of course, we're not building all the stuff that we're consuming.
Right.
Right? So we're actually shrinking the economy by the exact same value of the trade deficit. And of course, here's the kicker. We don't have unlimited stuff to trade, right? No. Eventually we run out of assets to sell, and eventually nobody wants to buy our debt because it's, because they're not getting a good price on it.
Right.
And then what happens at that point? You have an economic collapse. So that's what we're doing. We're mortgaging our past and our future in exchange for stuff today. This is America's, I like to call it a Faustian bargain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think we've gone through this cycle more than once?
America? I mean,
yeah.
I don't think so.
If you go back to the Great Depression, do you think that's what happened then, or is it a relatively recent phenomena?
This is a relatively recent phenomena here. Great Britain has gone through this already, though.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so Great Britain went through this, and of course we saw, Great Britain has been completely deindustrialized, right?
Yes, it has.
They just closed their last steel foundry down. Poland just overtook Great Britain in terms of GDP. And just so that everybody understands what a big deal this is, Great Britain, England in particular, was, the richest country per capita in the world, or top 3 richest countries per capita in the world, uh, for over 800 years.
Yeah.
And it's just been surpassed by Poland, which, 40 years ago was in the communist bloc, right? So it's actually unbelievable what's happened. And, unless we get the tariffs right, that's going to happen to America.
Is Trump getting the tariffs right?
He is pointing everything in the right direction, but there's obviously some room for improvement.
Okay, so this is way I put this, and I've had other guests on here who basically agreed with me and said the same thing, and that is, it appears if you're going to be a betting person that Trump is going to be successful at this. And but when I mean at this, well, let's say a finish line of roughly a year from now, right? More or less, because he's trying to time it for the midterms for political reasons. But that is the success isn't guaranteed. There's also some black swans and stuff that could happen that is not anticipated, and this could really go off the rails. Is that the way you see this too?
I mean, anything could always go off the rails. I mean, you talk about black swan events. I mean, COVID was a black swan event. Nobody really saw that coming, and it was the biggest thing that happened to the world economy.
Yes, and you had a really, I put this here, a quote on you're the editor of the National Economics editorial on that blog, and I really found this fascinating, Spencer. You said, and you actually did, it was your name was on this byline. You said if the economy is principally driven by the events like COVID-19, which exist beyond the scope of economic models, then what is the point of economics? And I love that because that's a really good question. What is the point of economics if you're going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been railing again, and this is why I'm approaching economics not from the perspective of a trained economist. I'm looking at this as someone before I became a lawyer, I was being trained as a historian. So I look at this, from an inductive historical approach, and more recently, I look at this from a logical approach, right? As a lawyer, I build my case, right? You got to look at the evidence.
I think that's good, actually. I think it's good that you're not a trained economist. We need more non-expert experts. That's what I think.
I think so. I'm a small business owner as well, right? You got to approach this from a business mindset.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. I interrupted you. My apologies.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, I'm taking a very heterodox position on this issue.
Yeah.
And I think it's the correct one because it's based on the actual evidence and inductive reasoning. So this is a big problem I have with academia in general. And I think we've seen a lot of this. People are talking about how studies are not able to be reproduced. Less than 50% of scientific papers can be reproduced when other scientists go and try to replicate the findings.
Yeah, right.
This is a huge problem. And it's actually a bigger problem in economics because people are treating economics as if it's a science, right? They're saying, you put inputs in, that will lead to particular outputs. The problem is that the fundamental approach to economics misunderstands what the economy is. The economy is not a cause and effect machine like a washing machine or a car. You can't just tinker with the parts of it and expect it to behave the same. The economy is something, it's what we call a complex system.
Yeah.
Right? So it has a lot more in common with, the human mind or the climate, things that we can't necessarily understand a priori, right? The initial conditions don't lead to the same conclusions every time. Right. And the only way that you can understand those systems is doing so through inductive reasoning. So we take a broad scope of evidence and we forecast likely outcomes based on that evidence, right? And economists aren't doing that. They're making predictions. You can't make predictions with complex systems. It's simply not possible.
Well, you can, but you'll be wrong a lot.
Yeah, it doesn't stop them, but that's why they're always wrong.
Yeah, right.
That's why they're always wrong. And that's why, I'm usually right. Not 100%, but if I forecast it 90%, I got it 90% of the time. That's the difference, right?
Yeah. God, I forgot what I was going to say. I had a point. I'm just going to read off my list here.
Hey, I can fill time. You get me talking, I'll talk about all that.
Well, that's kind of the idea of the show, but it's you I know what I was going to say, and that is okay, so you're not a trained economist, but these two guys won there's not a Nobel Prize for economics, but I can't remember what it's called, a couple years ago for basically saying or proving that in most economic models, economists assume that people will act rationally at every instance, and these guys won the yearly prize for saying, well, that doesn't happen. And I'm sitting home in my underwear thinking, duh.
Yeah,
No.
imagine winning a Nobel Prize for saying people aren't rational.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, no.
there is a Nobel Prize for economics, and there's I think it was Daniel Kahneman and his partner
You know what I'm
passed
talking
away.
about. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so they won a Nobel Prize for behavioral economics, which was looking at economics on the microscopic level, like microeconomics.
Yeah.
Um, Bringing in psychology and looking at how people actually make decisions. And what they found is that your typical person, when they're making a consumer decision or any decision, they're not thinking through the options rationally. They're not engaging their rational thought. Right. What they're doing is they're relying on certain heuristics and biases.
Yeah.
So patterns that they've picked up, and their brain just recognizes them. And what these guys did is they did a bunch of experiments, and they found that the heuristics and biases that govern, 80% of your day-to-day decisions are not rational. And what's funny is they're not rational in the same sort of predictable ways. So once you understand that the human consumer decisions are not based on rationality, the whole edifice of scientific economics falls apart, because it's based on this myth of the rational consumer. And of
Yeah.
course, consumers aren't
But forgive me,
rational. So what are we doing?
isn't that plainly freaking obvious to anybody? I mean, that's what I don't understand here. How, like, first of all, we're 80 years of economics. Why did you go under that assumption?
Yeah.
I mean, people are ridiculously irrational, especially when it comes to their money, and you're talking about a complex system. Well, really, I could say a complex system exists where you have a whole bunch of people making concurrent but different decisions on the same topic. So, like you said, you can maybe statistically kind of come up with a prediction, but you're not going to be right all the time because people just do stupid shit.
Yeah, exactly. And just just to flesh out the discussion, what they did with this myth of the rational consumer is they always understood that people aren't rational. Right? Everybody sort of implicitly understands that. What they were doing is they were saying, if you take the aggregate people, the aggregate behaves rationally because different people's irrationalities cancel each other out. Now, the problem with that is, first of all, it's not true.
I was
Because
going to say, you don't believe that, do you?
No, I don't believe it, because people are irrational in the same sorts of ways, and these manifest at the societal level.
Uh-huh.
But we'll bring in another piece of esoteric mathematics here. We can talk about fractals, right? So there is this French mathematician named Benoit Mandelbrot, and he wrote a book called The Fractal Geometry of Nature. And in this book, he talked all about how organic systems, complex systems, can often be described in terms of fractals. So the upper echelon of the system kind of resembles the medium, and the medium sort of resembles the small. And he was looking at things like the clouds, right? If you look at like a big storm cloud and you zoom in on it, it kind of looks the same as the big version of the cloud, right? It's just puffs of cloud. But the same thing is true in economics, right? You have, an individual has consumer preferences, but an individual also makes these decisions for the family. And then, of course, there's people who are making decisions like CEOs for businesses. And then people are making decisions for companies and countries, right? And of course, the decision of a big CEO, like a guy like Elon Musk, or the decision of a guy like President Trump, who runs the United States of America. These decisions have way, way, way more impact than any consumer decision that you or I are ever going to make. But the thing that's important to remember is that at each level of this decision-making hierarchy, everybody's irrational. Right? There's no rational. President Trump is not a rational consumer. Elon Musk is not a rational consumer, and neither am I.
No. The only caveat I have to that is that Elon Musk's decision may be way more important than mine, but my decision's way more important to me. You know,
That's true.
and I'm not trying to be facetious here. I mean in terms of but the fractal nature of that's very very interesting. I never thought of it before. I do think we should explain to the viewers where people don't know the fractal concept is that, as you kind of intimated, is that things look the same regardless of how overview or if they're microscopically drill down you go in any particular subject, either visually or just conceptually. That's the idea, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And you have people making decisions for companies in the same sort of way that they might make a decision for their country, or they might, like the leaders, right?
Yeah,
And like I said, they're all making fundamentally irrational decisions, or they have that, you know.
yeah.
So the myth of the rational consumer doesn't make
Have
any
you
sense.
have you ever read, this is completely off topic, I think. Have you ever read about this these studies that have been done where they've actually kind of proven that, or suggested that maybe free will doesn't exist, that people make decisions even before they think they've made them? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I've been looking. I have another research project where I was looking at consciousness, so I've read a bunch of books on the subject, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's kind of fascinating too, because not only then are you talking about making irrational decisions, you're talking about making decisions maybe even before you have all the input, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, people do that anyway; they just do. But I mean, even
They always do.
that's right. They're unconsciously doing it. It's like they're not even like trying to get all the input. It's like you make a decision. I don't know. It's just and
That's those heuristics and biases that I was talking about, right? I mean, you're a lot of the time the judgment just sort of intuitively comes to you before you even really know what you're doing, right?
uh-huh. Yeah, right. That's kind of right. Exactly. I'm prying here. What are you studying on consciousness? Because we talk about a lot of that on the show.
Yeah, so I was looking into it in relation to in relation to the book, because ultimately what I'm doing in the book, I mean, it's we sort of branded the book around tariffs,
Yeah,
right? Because tariffs are sort of the 80-20 principle that's coming out of the book, the practical solution that's coming out of the book.
right.
Reshore is about a lot more than that. What Reshore is about how the economy
Yeah,
grows.
forgive me, but I did not read the book, but I read a lot about it, and I actually came to the conclusion that maybe that your title was not the best you guys could have come up with. I really did, because the book seems to be about more than just tariffs. But anyway, my two bits. What do I know?
Hey, that's
Guy
fair
in
enough.
Minneapolis, sitting in Minneapolis in my underwear. What do I know? Not this moment. Just want to point that out. No, I don't do TV in my underwear. I don't do that. But yeah. So what have you learned about consciousness so far?
Well, in relation to the book, what I'll say is I was looking into it specifically in terms of creativity, because part of the thesis of the book, like the core elements of what I'm talking about, are how did the economy grow, right? And to answer that question, ultimately you have to understand that economic growth is really just a function of technological growth. And what is technological growth? Well, it's a story of human creativity in the long run. It's people coming up with solutions to problems and doing things more efficiently, right? So
Yeah,
it's invention, it's innovation, it's automation, and all of that boils down to creativity. So how do people make creative decisions, and sort of what's at the core of creativity? It's an interesting question, and of course, the science. Well, the science is always out on these things.
well, that actually gets to some of the things you've written about AI, which of all the stuff I read that I'll put it. This is the only one stuff where maybe I disagree with you. So I mean, you have said, like a lot of other people have said, that AI ultimately will not really. Well, I think the term is labor transference, and that you used examples. Examples I always use is bank tellers and ATMs, because that's an example that Barack Obama used. Bank
Right.
ATMs replace bank tellers, but you still need people to fix ATMs, and so the net job loss is zero. People lose their jobs as bank tellers, and then people get jobs as ATM repairmen, right? So, and that's kind of what you and a lot of other people think is going to happen with AI. And I know all the historical examples that you mentioned. I know they're all right. I actually think this is going to be fundamentally different. And the reason I do is because my I think at some point, we're probably not there yet, but at some point, AI is literally going to replace people, literally. So, I mean, you're not talking about, like, here's a good example. I mean, they're talking about Tesla's going to put AI into their robots. They got Android, what's the word I'm looking for? Anna, wow. Uh, they're ambulatory robots. They look like people. They're humanoid robots.
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, you put AI in one of those. Now you have basically something that does the job of a person. It's $25,000 a year. It doesn't need to sleep. It doesn't need to eat. It doesn't need a vacation. And why would you hire somebody this robot is literally going to take a person's place? And so, that's where I think that maybe you might be mistaken about this, but convince me that I'm wrong. Go ahead.
I don't know if I can convince you that I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm not going to claim to know the answer to this
The
question.
whole show is based on speculation. Don't you know that? All I do is sit here and speculate. That's all I do.
Yeah, I love speculating. Okay, so what I'll say is I'll give you the standard talking points that I usually give to people, and then we'll get a little more creative. Okay.
All right.
So the way I see this typically is I think AI is a really great productivity tool. I think we can get a lot more work done per sort of man hour with it.
Yeah.
And AI has been really helpful for me too, even just doing research. Like this book was all analog research. I was taking out books from the library. I was downloading books. I was doing it all myself because I wrote it before AI.
Yeah.
And now I'm almost kicking myself because I probably could have done the research for the book, in the space of a couple of weeks.
When did you finish
or less?
When did you finish it?
2019. I think we finished it in 2019, and we were sort of updating it and waiting for a good release for it. But the bulk of it was done, before any of this AI stuff was really coming out. But,
so go ahead.
Yeah. So this is what I'm saying is this is one of the last great books before AI. So if you want an analog book, you should get your hands on it.
Yeah.
All the rough around the edges.
By Kindle copy, do you?
So here's something interesting. So if you look at stevedores, so stevedores are those guys in the old days that used to, and they still have them, but they were the guys that unloaded ships.
Yeah.
Unloaded cargo from ships. In the 1800s, this was a really big profession because it was hard to unload ships. You needed a lot of manpower and animal power to do it, right?
Right.
And then somewhere along the line, they came up with this amazing thing. It's called the forklift. They came up with a forklift and pallet system. And this made unloading a product, astronomically easier. The invention of the forklift, it's estimated, made your average worker 200 times more productive.
I believe that.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. But even with all that added productivity, it didn't actually affect the unemployment rate. It just, people moved around and we got richer.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true for, all sorts of other inventions. The spinning jenny, all these things in the Industrial Revolution, flying shuttle, steam engines. I mean, these guys, these technologies made us, hundreds of times more productive.
Right.
And
I know you're right. I'm not arguing.
But it could be different this time. We don't know.
Yeah.
Because I think AI is in some ways doing something unique. And what it's doing is it's sort of mimicking human thought.
Right.
And I think that's very different than a lot of the technologies that have come before it. So, we could be onto something different. Also, something that's interesting is that AI is doing creative things. It's doing things that are, previous technologies would never do anything creative. AI
would you
can
agree
help
with
you with creativity.
my assessment that AI is not that good right now at creative stuff, but you give it 10 years, it'll probably be fantastic. I don't know.
Yeah, it's improving a lot. I mean, even the difference between whatever AI they had first on X, they use Grok, right?
Yeah.
They just came out with the Grok 4. It's like, I think Grok 3 came out in February. We have Grok 4 that just came out in July. It's like astronomically better in the space of 5 months. It's pretty crazy.
Right. But then you get, and I don't know how this affects the topic of your book, but I'm sure you probably heard about this. All of a sudden now you got AI that refuses to shut itself off.
I don't know if I believe that necessarily, but I mean, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I mean, these are legitimate news reports, and I had a guy on here who wrote a book called Brian Crilly wrote a book called soulless intelligence, and he is an AI entrepreneur. He runs an AI company, and
Yeah.
he said, I told him when he was on here that the only possible thing I saw flaw in what he was doing is that his thing is, well, AI has no need, has no sexual needs, no tactile needs. It lives in a box, and because of that, it will never have a soul, or how you define sentience, or how you even define consciousness. But his thing is, it will be intelligent as fuck. It will be just really, really smart. But he's kind of, he's drawing the distinctions between all those different things, and he said, well, the thing is, it has no real needs, and because of that, it can pretend to relate to people, but it can't actually relate to people. Okay, fine. But I said, well, what about self-preservation, which I call the HAL problem, 2001? Because and he said, him and his brother, he said that was the only thing they highly debated on writing the book, because he said, yes, he said he could see a thing where like HAL equated being shut off to death. And so because of that, he couldn't deal with that. So it killed everybody, and now we have, he was on here about maybe 3 months ago, but now there's reports coming out in the major press about the fact that there's all these development versions like the Chat GDP and Anthropic and all these places and all this all seemed to happen all of a sudden, that these programs, they asked the developers, asked them to shut themselves down. They refuse. As a matter of fact, I think at the Chat GDP, the one development version, they were after it refused the first time, they ran experiment. They asked it 100 times under different scenarios, and it refused 86 times. So I mean, why did I bring this up?
Just jumping on that, just back to the morality and the sentience and the conscious question.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that AI needs it doesn't have to be sentient to have self-preservation. I mean, you look at all sorts of
was my point. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all sorts of lower order animals. They're all concerned with self-preservation. Bacteria are
in some ways it's kind of logical. I turn
self-preservation is the logic of existence.
Right. Yeah. Right? That's right.
So you don't have to have a soul to want to preserve yourself. I mean, animals do it.
Right. Well, first of all, do you even buy his assumption that AI will never have a soul, or that these machines never will? Do you buy that yourself?
Yeah, I don't think AI. Well, here's the deal. I don't think AI is ever going to have a soul or anything of the sort. But I also think the question is sort of moot, because it'll be indistinguishable from things that we would say have a soul.
That's right. That's
so functionally, what's the difference? I don't really think there's a functional difference.
Same thing. If you can fake having a soul, it doesn't matter whether you really have one or not.
Yeah, not particularly. You never know. You never know the difference.
You wouldn't.
And the reality is again, things don't need to be sentient or conscious to behave in ways that are self-preserving.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you look at, just like I said, any sort of lower order animal, insects. I mean, all of these guys, all these critters want to preserve themselves.
That's right.
Right. So why wouldn't an AI? I mean, I think an AI is a lot smarter than an ant or something.
And you tell me. I think even Canadians want to preserve themselves. Don't they?
No, they don't. The Canadian is entirely suicidal. And I'm born and raised in Alberta, with where Ted Cruz is from. And there's going to be a referendum next year, and likely Alberta is leaving Canada. So there you go.
You think so? You think that's
gonna happen? I think so. I think so.
Well, my friend was telling me the other day. He said, "Well, if Canada was really smart, they would actually become the next state of the union." I said, "Now," and this is my question to you. I said, "No, really, it would be the 10 provinces of Canada would become 10 states. You wouldn't take the whole country, but I don't know."
Yeah, Canada's pretty diverse place. I mean, they got a whole, the French people in Quebec and all of this.
Well,
I think the West is probably going to separate. I mean, Canada is an artificial construct. A lot of people don't understand that, right? Like in America, there's the core American people. Is a nation of people that have a common, background, identity, culture.
Yeah.
That's not the same thing in Canada. Like, for example, I live out in Western Canada, in Alberta. Alberta was not settled by Canadian settlers, right? Alberta was settled by British settlers and American settlers. And of course, on my mom's side, we're from England, and then on my dad's side, we're from America, from the United States, right?
Yeah.
But at no point was there any Canadians involved, sort of, in founding Alberta, right? So Canada has a lot of sort of unique heritages and sort of
So do
different
you look
nations
at it as a
within it.
duality? I mean, I've been to Quebec City. It's you're basically in Europe, you know?
Totally different place. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
totally different place. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
never been. Yeah, different language, different religion, different culture, different
right.
history.
It just feels
Yeah,
different.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a different. I mean, it's a different nation, right? It's a
yeah,
different people, right? I mean, you look at people, for example, up in Alberta. There's. I mean, I'll be honest. I've been all over the United States. I've been all over English Canada. Your day to day, there's very little difference between people wherever you go, right?
yeah.
Quebec is like a totally different place, though.
Well, I have to I like I said, I spent a year in Thunder Bay, Ontario. When I moved there, I thought, "Oh, it's the 51st state of the union." That was my thought, and 12 months later, the longer I was there, the more I realized I was in a foreign country. I have to
Yeah, those Ontario is a weird place. They got bagged milk, I think, don't they?
say again, what? They
They
what?
got don't they bag their milk out there or something?
Yeah. Yeah. They
Yeah,
and they eat their french fries with vinegar. Yeah, they do that.
yeah, I think so. Well, this is what I was saying. Alberta, for example, is very different than Ontario because Alberta was settled by Americans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Different place.
Yeah. So, do you think Trump has, getting back to the tariff thing, do you think he has a handle on the concept of basically what? And forgive me, is there a name for this about the fact that like I said about the fact that you want to keep everything that it's better to have rising revenues even if things cost more? Is there a name for this concept?
Well, sort of. I mean, really, we're operating in. We can call it the American system.
Uh huh.
Because really it's based on Alexander Hamilton's report on manufacturers. This is sort of the genesis of this high protective tariffs
Yeah.
to promote domestic industry. That all really comes from Hamilton and his observations of what Great Britain was doing, and then he kind of took that blueprint and he applied it to the United States, right? So what President Trump is doing, he's actually returning to sort of that Hamiltonian model that was really prevalent in the 1800s.
Why do you think so many people don't think this will work?
Because they're bought and paid for. Let's be honest.
Oh my God, a man of my heart.
Well, I'll tell you some numbers, and these numbers should frighten people. Okay.
All right.
So since 1974, America has run a large chronic trade deficit. When you adjust it for inflation, the cumulative total value of that trade deficit, it's about $28 trillion.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. It's like a whole year's worth of GDP. And we talked about earlier, how do you pay for that, right?
Yeah.
You pay for that by selling assets and debt. So essentially what you have is you have $28 trillion worth of demand for US dollars. And that is plugged into the stock market, buying stocks. It's plugged into the real estate market, buying real estate. And of course, it's plugged into the Federal Reserve System, selling off debt. This is why foreigners own 17% of American stocks today. It's why they're buying up, 60 to 80 billion dollars worth of real estate every single year.
Right.
It's why they own over $8 trillion of the national debt.
Yeah.
This is all what's being sold, right? And who profits from higher real estate prices and higher stock prices and demand for bonds?
Bankers.
Bankers, right? So,
Yeah.
and it's these bankers, it's these really big corporate hedge funds like BlackRock, and who's buying up all the media? Bankers, right? And who funds the think tanks for all these economists and donates to universities?
I see a pattern.
Yeah, you see a pattern, right? So it's these Wall Street bankers. They've bought up a monopoly on information, right? Because they want to keep the gravy train flowing. Are you going to give up $28 trillion? Get out of here. They don't want to give that up.
Am I just a cynic? But you'd think at some point they would realize it's not even good in their own self-interest to basically starve the rest of the country. But do you think am I just a naive fool?
Yeah, these people, you got to remember, these people, for the most part are hedonistic. They're not, I mean, a lot of them are not even, Americans. I mean, we're talking about a global elite that really just,
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing everywhere. I mean, the same thing is happening in Canada. The same thing is happening in the United Kingdom. In fact, it happened first in the United Kingdom, right? The
Uh-huh.
city of London totally destroyed the UK, and
Yeah.
now they're destroying America. But it's the same
Yeah.
playbook and it's the same people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. A person I'd love to have on this show is George Soros because I don't understand
that'd
how.
be a crazy interview.
Oh, it would, because the thing is, so here's a guy who got first of all, and I don't know enough about stock trading and economics to know this, but he's written 2 or 3 books on his methods, and people say those books don't make any sense. That's what I've heard. Traditional economists traditional economists say what he's done shouldn't work. But like I said, I don't
Right.
pretend to know about this. But that said, you wonder why a guy who made so much money in this system wants to dismantle the system. That's the part I do not get. Can you lend any insight into this at all? Why does he think that way?
I can't speculate as to why George Soros thinks the way he thinks,
That's a
but he's
speculative show. Go ahead.
there's a lot of people doing those sorts of things, right? I mean, people are doing self-destructive things for thousands of
Yeah,
years, right?
yeah. Well, and actually, that even gets back to what you were talking about the example about rational thought and economics. About that, I look at that and think that's completely irrational. Why would you do that? You know?
Yeah, it is irrational, but the parasite always kills the host, and it's not in the parasite's interest to kill the host, is it?
No, that's true, and that's a very good analogy. It really is. Yeah, cancer is like cancer kills itself. You know?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and the same thing is true of this sort of financial banker class, right? I mean, they killed Great Britain, and now they moved on to the next place, right? Because you can speculate as to why people are so greedy or whatever it may be, but ultimately, I think man's reach exceeds his grasp. So
Yeah. Do you have another book coming?
nothing in the works at the moment. I tell you, I'd love to write a book on sort of the rise and fall of civilization. So I think that'd be a great one.
Oh, why don't you? No, I'm
Well,
serious.
I just might. Because I hate this. A lot of the work that's come out. Jared Diamond, for example, I hate that guy. Can't stand his work. And
Who?
he, Jared Diamond, he wrote Guns, Germs, and Steel. That guy.
I'm not actually not familiar with them. I'm not.
Oh, he's like big in the sort of, I don't know, liberal publishing
Uh-huh.
media darling. But anyways, I think a lot of the books on the rise and fall of civilizations are not very good. So I think I could do better.
Actually, honest to God, I think you could. It's like, first of all, I mean, you had a contrary position here, and I don't see. I mean, it makes rock solid sense to me, But I have to say, it took me a while to come around. That's even before I knew who you were. I mean, I'm a former liberal, and I became a conservative primarily from studying economics.
Mm.
So in the 1990s. When Clinton pulled this NAFTA thing, I actually thought, well, that makes sense. And then I started to look at it more and more, and it's like, no, it doesn't. It took me a while though. It took me a while to come around.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were like that. And the libertarian sort of economics has it's got a really great allure to it because it's, on its face, it's neutral, it's individualistic. People like that. It's all about growth.
Yeah,
The problem that people don't understand, though, is that people aren't just individuals. People also exist, as a member of their family and, of course, their community, their neighborhood, their
right.
town, their state, their country. And there's sort of all these overlapping identities, and they're all important, right? Because on the one hand, it's like, yeah, I'm Spencer Morrison, but I'm also, I'm also a son. I'm a brother. I'm a member of, my, my nation. Uh, and these are all important things. And the problem is with this sort of libertarian economics, it breaks everything down and it focuses just on individual consumption. But individual consumption is not necessarily the best way to make a community a thriving community,
No. Yeah.
right? So, I was having a debate, one of these zero hedge debates with Peter Schiff, and I say, it's like, and he was laughing, and I said, "You're laughing when a factory closes down and everybody loses their jobs and a community dies. So what? You can save 50 cents on a spatula? Like, good for you."
Yeah. Well, I know, and I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, is that worth the trouble? I'd say no, it isn't. Matter of fact,
No,
I
I don't
think.
think so.
I mean, even back to bring this full circle and back to your kind of point here is that I think it'd be better if you had more people with more money and then raise the price of the spatula 50 cents, and that seems, I mean, my impression is that that's where Trump's coming from. So, I mean, we'll find out, but it's like, I think that's what he's thinking. So,
I think so. I think so. And President Trump, uh, everybody's saying that he's flip flopping on all sorts of issues. The reality is, though, is that President Trump has been he's been pro tariff since the 80s. I mean, I
yeah,
remember an
true.
interview he did an interview with Oprah back in, I think, 1982. And he was talking about how, we need tariffs to protect our industries
Yeah,
and make sure people have good
right.
middle class jobs. And he hasn't changed his tune on that in 45 years.
No, he hasn't. No, that's true. That's true. Spencer, will you come back sometime? I like talking to you.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. Yeah, always happy.
You had a little bit of a tiny hint of Canadian accent, and that amuses me.
Hey, yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. They're all over the place here.
We'll put I did not have a picture of your book, but we'll put it up on our blog so people
Sure.
can link to it on Amazon. So people, yeah, and I'm going to buy it now and read it myself. So I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, we'll have an in-depth conversation. There's a lot of stuff in there that you're going to find interesting because it's not just a book about economics.
Right, that's the impression I got reading about it. Right.
I talk about all sorts of stuff. We talk about people dietary choices and how the economy impacts what you eat and how you eat and how that affects your health. We talk about the environment and pollution. I talk all about there's the economic theory stuff, but it's also a book about economic history. So there's a lot of stuff in there for everybody.
Well, Spencer, if you knew me, you know that my food intake definitely affects the economy.
Yeah, I feel the same way some days, my friend.
I've enjoyed this immensely. Seriously, we'll talk again. Okay.
All right, my friend.
I really
Thank you
appreciate
so much.
it. You take care. We'll see you.
Have a good night.
I'm going to run the bumper. What the heck? That's Spencer Morrison. His book is called Reshore. Let me get the actual, I want to make sure, and I get the subtitle correct here. It's called, oh, Jesus, Jim. Reshore. Tariffs will bring our jobs home and revive the American dream. That's what the book's called. We'll put a link up on our blog. And I have to be perfectly blunt with you, but I've been a little bad about keeping that up to date. We got a couple things we want to add from the last week, but we'll get that done here in short order. So I hope Spencer comes back. Though he's actually a very entertaining guy, and also a lot of really good points too. It does seem like my impression is the tide is turning toward his point of view. I mean, right now, especially 6-8 weeks ago, if you asked any economist about tariffs, almost any legitimate economist will tell you that they're going to be a disaster. And not only has that not happened so far, but like I was said at the beginning of that interview, if you look at past history on that, it's never happened either. So, it's like what are they talking about? Theory and practice, two different things. And that's exactly what Spencer's talking about too. So I had not because Spencer came on ASAP. We were having some trouble connecting. That's happened. This is the problem with running this show. People have trouble. We have trouble connecting through the inner tube. And like, for example, tomorrow we're going to have Shaz Khan on, and we're going to do her interview in the afternoon. We're going to pre-tape it, and that's great. We avoid all these technical problems. But on the other hand, too, there's something about doing a live. There is, and I like doing a live. So yeah, Spencer was here. He was live. We just plopped him right on as soon as the show started. No bumper, no intro, anything. So I'm gonna want to read you our schedule for the next couple weeks. Tomorrow, Shaz Khan's going to be here. She wrote the book, The Ultimate Vaccine Timeline. Now she's out of the country, and because of that, we're going to do her interview audio only via phone. So we'll put up a nice picture of her, but you won't actually see her talking. But yeah, that's cool though. That's all right. So she like Spencer. She's not actually a doctor, or a medical professional. She wrote this book on vaccines. It's essentially the history of the vaccines and why they work. And we got a lot of questions for her because Rand Paul, right now in Congress, he's not giving it up. He wants to see Anthony Fauci in jail. He just said that again today. He's like, and I don't, I really, I'd love to ask Rand Paul, like, is this a personal thing? Because I don't know if you understand this. Rand Paul is a medical doctor. He is. There's like in the Senate, I think there's about 8 or 9 medical doctors in the Senate, and Paul's one of them. And yeah, he is. I think this is one of the real reasons he's been he's been pounding Fauci for years. And I think it's because he thinks, well, I think he said this, that he thinks that medically Dr. Fauci is a fraud. And that might, and I hate to say this, in 2020, when the COVID thing reared its ugly head, for the longest time, for months, I defended Fauci. I did, until it just became, you couldn't do it anymore. The guy was so full of shit. I jumped ship too, you know, because I thought, well, he's just a scientist. He's not making policy here or anything. No, he actually tried to make policy. He did. I mean, all that stuff about him being a scientist was all cover for him doing whatever he wanted to do. So as of today, it was in the news in Breitbart this afternoon. Uh, uh, Rand Paul says he still wants Fauci brought up on charges of lying to Congress because he says that's Fauci specifically said. And as a matter of fact, now I did not see this, but Rand Paul has said he actually gave Fauci the chance to get out of this. He said, because the second time Fauci came before the Senate, he said, "Look, you said this the last time you were here. This is false. Do you want, I'm going to give you the opportunity to take this back." And Fauci refused. He doubled down. He said, "Nope, you know." So, and it was specifically about is funding gain of function research at the Wuhan lab. That's he says that his department, and so he works for the National Institute of Health, but he was the head of the National Institute for Infectious Diseases. I think that's what it's called, NSIDS or something like that. God, Fauci had that job he didn't work there for 37 years. He had the job of being he was the head of that for 37 years. I don't know. Maybe some of you I've had friends who have I've had 2 friends who had jobs for 29 years each. I can't even relate to doing something for 37 years. The longest job I've ever had is 9 years. I can't even relate to doing something for 37 years. He was the head of that division for 37 years. He made when he retired, he was the only person in the entire federal government, 4 million non-military people, or is it 2 million? Forgive me. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's off the top of my head here. Let's say 2 million because it's lower. Let's just be conservative. 2 million people, non-military personnel working at the federal government. He's the only person who made more money than the president of the United States. Not by much, but he did. I think when he retired, he was making $430,000 a year. The president gets paid $400,000 a year. So, and he's got a fantastic pension. And Rand Paul has been completely open about the fact he wants to take that away from him. You know, and seriously, and I don't. If you were a doctor and you saw another doctor acting like a criminal, I suppose you could get pretty upset. So sometimes I think my problem is I don't get upset enough. Like I had a friend call me up today. He's talking about this whole thing, and this is actually on my list of things of discussion. This is a part of the show we call the Gymcast because I'm not a journalist and this is not a newscast, but I talk about the news just like I'm trying to get Spencer to speculate because you have no idea the people I try to get to speculate on this show and they won't do it. I mean, Stan Gordon came on here very famously. He's the UFO and Bigfoot researcher, and he would not speculate on what Bigfoot was. He's convinced they exist, and all he said is, and of course I've heard this from many other people, so he's not alone in this, that he said there's a paranormal uh, part of the Bigfoot experience that cannot be explained. And this is specifically about the fact there's a whole bunch of people who say they get in front of Bigfoot and Bigfoot will disappear right before their eyes. This is not an isolated occurrence. It's happened many, many times. And so while most animals don't do that because it's really easy. When Larry Newman comes on here, he's an actual Bigfoot investigator for the Bigfoot Field Research Organization. And you ask Larry, he will tell you that Bigfoot is an undiscovered or uncategorized cataloged primate, and that makes perfect sense. And people say, well, how could something be running around the woods and we never catch it? There's so many things that we have never caught. And here's the perfect example. The giant squid was rumored for 2,000 years. And finally, in 2006, this is only 19 years ago, they finally caught one. Finally, after 2,000 years. So no, it's not at all it's not at all unusual that Bigfoot would be an undiscovered ape running around the forest. That's completely logical in the fact that we can't catch one, that we have never caught one, because it's pretty crafty. It's not stupid, you know. But then you bring this other thing into it. I mean, this is the dividing line between people are the Bigfoot investigators or researchers, or whether there's this paranormal component or not. And I got way off the topic. I was going to talk about what we were going to talk about. Hold on. Oh, Jeffrey Epstein. That's right. That's what we're going to talk about. So this is really divided. My friend calls me up today and says, and he likes to make fun of me because he says I'm a conservative conspiracy theorist, which is basically true. So I acknowledge that. Okay, fine. I'm more a conspiracy theorist than I am a conservative, if you ask me. But yeah, okay. And he says, well, what's happening here? It's like the mega countries really mad, and they are. And the thing is, I understand. I think it's justified. Here's the problem is, and the thing is, you can't be evil either or about this sort of thing. So there's the thing about did Epstein kill himself? Then is there a client list? What's all the nefarious stuff that went down? All this. If you take it separately, I don't think it. And I'm not the only person who said this. I don't think it matters that if he actually killed himself or not. It doesn't. Yeah, he might have. And then, of course, people say, well, he didn't kill himself. He got murdered, because he's dead, obviously. So either if he didn't kill himself, somebody else killed him. Yeah, somebody could have killed him, and maybe not. And the thing, well, if somebody killed him, that was to shut him up. Well, yeah, maybe that's true, But the real thing that happened this afternoon, and this happened before I even put this in the description, the rundown of the show tonight. Alan Dershowitz was on Fox News, and he said, and you have to understand, remember this because it's kind of been lost now, but Dershowitz was one of the people who was personally fingered. Oh God, that's a terrible analogy, isn't it? He was personally fingered for having had sex with underage girls at Epstein's Island, and he said he said that's absolutely not true. I think he said he rode on the airplane, but never went to Epstein Island. I think I got that right. That he never went there, even though he did take an airplane ride from Jeffrey Epstein. And so, but he said you have to understand that a lot of this stuff is under lock and key, is sealed because of grand jury testimony. So he says that he thinks they've released. Now, also, he claims that he says there is a client list and he's seen it. He says he can't say what's on it. He said he is bound by court confidentiality. He cannot say what's on it, but he actually claims that it exists and he's seen it. He's claimed that. And that was partly because he was one of the erstwhile defendants. He isn't anymore, from what I understand, but he was at one time. And he's also an attorney. So I assume he wasn't representing himself, but he knows the game, So he said that stuff does exist. And he says other than that, he can't talk about it. But he says that because this all came on in grand jury testimony, it's all sealed. And you will say, well, the guy's dead. No, the problem is Ghislaine, whatever her name is, I can't pronounce it. No one can pronounce it. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison and she's appealing her conviction, which means that technically that trial is still open. And because of that, they can't release any of the stuff that they got in grand jury testimony. So he says he thinks they've actually released everything they can release. The only question he had, and which I have too, is why don't they just come out and say that? And they haven't. And I don't know if that's poor communication or what the deal is, but that's what he thinks, and that makes perfect sense. That does. The other thing that came out this weekend about this. So if you listen to the show, was it last Monday? Not yesterday, but a week. I think it was a week ago Monday or a week ago Tuesday. I can never remember. Bill Walton was on. He's the former CEO of Allied Capital. Fascinating guy. He does a really good podcast. We had a fantastic discussion. Well, him and I are talking about this, and he said that now Bill Walton's extremely well connected. First of all, he was on Donald Trump's 2016 transition team. I did ask him specifically how well he knew Trump, and he said they weren't close friends, but he said they were what he would call definitely acquaintances. So he said, yes, I've been in a room alone with him several times and talked to him, that sort of thing. But he said he did not categorize them as close friends. But he was picked by Trump to help with the transition team in 2016. So he knows a lot of people, a lot of very important people. And he said that his network's telling him that, my speculation was that Jeffrey Epstein worked for the CIA, and that I have speculated that one of the reasons they won't release this quote unquote client list because of the 535 elected officials in Congress. Let's say 100 people are on Congress are on that list for various reasons, that literally replacing them would bring down the government, and that they decided they didn't want to do that for obvious reasons, right? And so I've speculated that he worked for the CIA, because the thing about Epstein is that nobody really knows where he got his money. Now, I know that sounds really weird. And if you go down his biography, he was the head of several hedge funds, all sorts of stuff. He had very extremely high level, extremely well paying jobs. But that said, there's no evidence of him ever doing any stock trades ever on a personal level. That there's no people look for this and look for it, they can't find it. So okay, so maybe he was getting paid, like $5-10 million a year, but supposedly he was worth, when he died, I think that's the quote I saw, was $600 million. There's no real evidence of where he got that money, that amount of money anyway. So it's always been that he was blackmailing people. That was always that was supposedly the modus operandi, and that he was working for the CIA, but supposedly was come out what Walton said, that his network was telling him is that he worked for Mossad, that is the Israeli version of the CIA, the Israeli intelligence service. So it was on Saturday or Sunday, the head of Mossad in Israel comes out and says, "No, Jeffrey Epstein didn't work for us." I'm talking to my friend today. I said, "Well, now I'm certain he worked there." Because you wouldn't send the guy who's running Mossad out into a press conference to deny the fact that a guy doesn't work there, unless it was really freaking important and you had something to cover up. I become total cynic at this point. I have completely. And so I figured that because they came on and said Epstein didn't work there, I figured he worked there. That's what I figure. So, and this president's saying the same thing. He said, no, there's no evidence he worked for Mossad. I mean, Walton was apparently not the only person who's been, who's been in the loop on this, and so, they're coming out, they're saying, but it's like doth protesteth too much, in Shakespeare's words. So anyway, it's just but people are really upset because the people think that stuff's being held from the public, and the thing about MAGA is that wasn't supposed to happen here, and people are really, really mad. And then on top of that, apparently Dan Bongino's thinking about quitting. He's on this issue. He's not getting along with Pam Bondi, and so who knows what he knows. But the thing is, even if he quits, his security oath is probably lifetime, so he can't talk about it either. Oh, geez, it's a mess. It is. And I told my friend, and I do believe this, that I don't think this will happen. Once again, betting odds. If I was going to bet on it, I would not bet on this. But this has the potential to bring down the entire Trump administration. That's what I think. So they better deal with it pretty damn quick. And the president saying, "Who is this guy? He's dead. He's not important anymore," is not going to cut it. It isn't, and he knows it. Trump is not that stupid. So anyway, this is really fascinating to me, and to a whole bunch of other people. All right, moving on. Okay, so you're thinking, well, Jim, what could be more important than that? I'll tell you what's more important than that: television ratings. First of all, I want to my congratulations to the guys at the Ruthless Podcast who actually signed a development deal, or I'm sorry, a licensing deal with Fox News today, and they're not going to be on Fox News proper. Their show isn't. They're going to be signed up as Fox News contributors, but Fox News Digital is going to be now carrying their podcast, and I think they're going to try to stick on radio too. I'm not sure, but anyway, congratulations to them. That's pretty cool. That's right. So what else also happened today is John Nolte wrote a column in Breitbart about the Daily Show, bragging about the fact that it has its highest ratings in 4 years, even though its highest rating is only 400,000 people. And if you've watched the show before, you know that I've said this many times that in cable television, basically anything under a million people is nothing. And that's where CNN's ratings are right now. CNN's drawing 400,000 people in prime time, so they're basically nobody's watching, basically. So Nolte brought this up, the fact that Comedy Central is bragging about this, and there's nothing to brag about. And he's got a point here too. You know, this went on even when Jon Stewart did the Daily Show full time, 5 days a week, or I think it was 4 days a week. Now he only does 1 day a week. But even when he was doing full time for 15 years, the ratings were never really that good. But you never know it looking at the press. The press, he was a media darling on the left. They've wrote about him and wrote about him. You know, he was end up in Sex in the City. He was called America's boyfriend, all sorts of stuff. You know, the ratings were never that good, never. You know, and okay, so uh, Stewart's drawing actually on Monday. Stewart's drawing about 500,000 people. The rest of the week they're drawing 400,000. But comparison is that Greg Gutfeld on the Gutfeld show on at night on prime time and Fox News draws just under 3 million. And I didn't know this. I found this really fascinating. The Price is Right on CBS in the mornings draws just under 4 million people. And another comparison there too is Stephen Colbert on the Late Show only draws 2 million. In other words, The Price is Right draws twice as many people as Stephen Colbert does. But you never know this reading the not even just the press, but even the trade publication, TV trade publications. You never know this stuff. You never. I mean, the ratings numbers are public, but nobody ever really bothers to put them in context. That's the thing. So they're bragging about Stewart's ratings, and yeah, nobody's watching. Okay, fine. Meanwhile, at the State Department, Marco Rubio fired 1,300 people, and you'd think the world had come to an end. And this gets back to what I was talking about, like Fauci, being there for 37 years. You know, I this is embarrassing for me to say, but I've said this on the show before. I think I've been fired about a dozen times. I've lost count at this point, how many times I've been fired. And these people over at the State Department, they got fired. And actually, they weren't fired, they were laid off. Their jobs are probably not coming back, but they weren't actually fired for cause, or just laid off. And you think the world ended. Now, and I know it's terrible when people lose your job, but I think part of the problem here is you're talking about people who've never lost their job ever. You need a little experience, folks. You do. It's everything. Put everything in context. It's like, and they're talking about, somebody over at the State Department put a sign saying, resist fascism. Oh, yeah. Get you losing your job, you being cut out because we can't afford you is fascism, huh? Yeah, sure. Tell me about it. There's another thing I read too today about a woman named Faya India. I've never heard of this woman before. She wrote a column on the Free Press, on Barry Weiss's Free Press, about the fact that for the current young generation, and this is the reason I brought this up, because there's a segue here, believe it or not. For this current young generation, uh, everything has been diluted and now compiled into a mental problem, a mental flaw. You have an emotional issue. Everything. She said, no, we have no personalities anymore. We're not quirky. We're not late. We're not. you know, it's just like, no, you actually have a mental issue and you need medication. And there's something to that, you know. I think these kids, lack of a better term, if you don't mind me calling them that, uh, the people under the age of 25, for sure under the age of 30, they can't even conceive of anything bad happening to them. So they take a job at the anywhere, let's say the State Department, but anywhere, and they get let go, even because of a budget cutback. Like in that sense, you're not really fired. You're laid off, and they can't imagine anything bad happening to them. This has been an affront to humanity that this has happened to me. Uh, I don't know what to tell you. It isn't. You're wrong. That's what I'll tell you right there. And meanwhile, in the Netherlands, they're running out of electricity. Now, the funny part here is that the largest natural gas field in the world is under the ground in the Netherlands, the largest one. I'm not talking about petroleum, I'm talking about natural gas. That stinky stuff where we add the stinky smell that basically comes out of the ground. And I've never understood why the green movement has not embraced this, because it's 95% cleaner than fossil fuels. Natural gas is almost completely clean, not quite, but almost. And yet they won't embrace using it because it comes out of the earth. It's a fossil fuel, and therefore it's bad, even though it's almost completely clean, almost. So they have the largest one on earth in the Netherlands, and they're running out of electricity because of all the green new bullshit. You know, uh, Once again, but getting back to Bill Walton being on the show, he launched something called the CO2 Coalition, and they've invited me to join, and I'm going to, because as you've heard, I've said on this program many times before. Besides the fact that human-caused climate change is a giant scam, what people really don't realize is that CO2 is not harmful, and it's not even a pollutant. It's the opposite. We need CO2. We don't have enough. And so this is what the CO2 coalition is trying to educate the public about. Well, apparently they don't want to use their natural gas in Netherlands to power the nation, and now they're rationing electricity. And then there's the other thing too. What about the goddamn nuclear reactors? Just build another one. That's completely clean. Now I'm glad to see that now some of the people in the green movement are coming toward that. They're saying that this is that nuclear reaction is a valid way to generate electricity. Well, yeah, duh. I could have told them that 50 years ago, especially now where we figured out all the problems. I mean, years ago there were problems about how you store the spent fuel, about the possibility of reactors not necessarily exploding but imploding. I mean, that's what happened although I think the one in Chernobyl actually did explode, I think. But that's the only explosion ever. 3 Mile Island basically melted down. That was an implosion. So I don't know if you know about that. There's 2 reactors at 3 Mile, and Microsoft bought them both. And the one that's not harmed, they're going to start back up because they need the electricity to run Copilot, believe it or not. And this is the other thing. So the world is starting to throttle back on fossil fuel electrical production, and yet AI and our computing demands are vastly increasing in electrical usage. Vastly. I mean, I just saw a thing that said by 2030, American electricity consumption in the United States is going to go up by 50%, and that seems realistic to me based on what I know. It's like the AI takes a query on AI, like the ChatGPT or Copilot. You write in a question that burns up the generating the answer burns up 5 times more electricity than searching the web, and that burns up quite a lot of electricity. And people never thought about that when that started. But you used to do your web search on Google, and it takes a good amount of electricity to come up with a result. And now you're looking at 5 times more. And who knows how much more electricity uh, AI is going to need going forward too. So yeah, the Netherlands, they screwed themselves. That's what they did. So finally, I'm going to wrap this up, folks. Finally, Mattel introduced the diabetes Barbie. I'm not kidding. They actually did. They have a diabetes Barbie, and diabetes Barbie has a little comes with a little syringe and a little blood picker thingy, and so uh, uh, this is not a joke. This is real. What is a joke is the Babylon Bee came up with their entry is Ozempic Barbie. And I came up with a show description today. I came up with Gray Alien Barbie, which comes with a examination table and equipment to put stuff in your rectum, anal probe. Got to keep the theme going, folks. You know, I'd spent the weekend with my family. A long story. I won't say what, but my cousin passed away, and we're cleaning out his house. And my cousin's husband Harvey, who works in Silicon Valley, great guy, love him. But they're asking me about this show, and I'm telling them what's going on. I said, yeah, we have a lot of people on talking about the UFO issue, And I said, just saying, the one thing I'm certain of is that the U.S. military has recovered at least 6 crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft. And Harvey, God bless him, he said, "Yeah, I'm gonna watch your show, but I don't know if I'm gonna watch the ones on UFOs because I know he doesn't. He thinks I'm full of shit. I know this. Still sticking to my guns though. We have that, especially this. I found this really amazing. I said this a couple of weeks ago. Uh, Hal Puthoff was on Joe Rogan, and of course, I basically get all the sloppy seconds from Coast to Coast AM on my guest list here. But it's true. If people go on Coast to Coast AM about 4 or 5 days later, they come on air. That's happened several times. But Putoff was on. He's a physicist, and he's been on every damn high advanced science project that the military's ever done. I mean, this guy's been everywhere. And he said, and I'm amazed he said it during the podcast. Right on the podcast, he said, no, as far as he knows, we have 10 of them. He said the military has 10 crash extraterrestrial spacecraft. I'd heard 9. He said 10. Maybe they've recovered one recently. I don't know. But I was amazed he said that because his security oaths must go a mile long. These guys, you have to understand this. They have to be so careful when they go when Lou Elizondo goes on a podcast or a television show. He has to filter every single thing he says because if he says the wrong thing in the wrong order or the wrong time, he can go to prison. And that's really and there this is serious shit, folks. I mean, people say, well, no one can keep a secret that long. Yeah, if you're threatened with 10 years in jail, I bet you could. I bet you could keep a secret that long. I was just reading about one of the guys who was at the Roswell crash site. And what he did is he never told his family, but he found an article about the fact that it was aliens. And he wrote on the article, he says, this is all true, and I still haven't busted my oath. That's what he wrote. Because he didn't say it, he just confirmed what was in the article. So yeah, it's this is serious shit. These people do not want to go to jail. And a lot of people think that's what's driving the whole secrecy, the whole thing, because there's a school of thought that if the president came out and they had quote unquote disclosure, the president came into the press briefing and said, oh, by the way, extraterrestrials are visiting Earth, that the people have kept a secret, that a whole bunch of them would end up going to jail because in some ways keeping it secret would also be a constitutional violation, and that it would technically be treason. And a lot of people think that's the reason they don't want disclosure to come out is because they want to make absolutely certain that nobody actually gets punished for keeping this secret. I don't know. Jazz Shaw was a guest on the show many times. He passed away in October. Rest in peace, Jazz. But he was connected to the Pentagon. He said they were constantly bickering about this within themselves. So I don't know what's going on, folks. I don't know what's going on with Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know what's going on with the tariffs. I don't know. I just want to get people on the show to speculate. That's what I want to do. So look, tomorrow, Shaz Khan, Shaz Khan is coming on. She's written, and her book is called, once again, it's called The Vaccine. What is it called, Jim? Jesus Christ. God, hold on. It's called The Ultimate Vaccine Timeline, a fact-packed history of vaccines. That's what it's called. And we're going to talk to her. She is, I think she's in Europe somewhere, but we're going to be talking to her via phone. That's tomorrow night. We're going to be taking calls tomorrow night. We did not take calls tonight. Um, Basically, I'm trying to plan this out ahead of time. We are going to be taking calls tomorrow night. If you want to call in, that's 325 call Jim. You can call in even if we're not on the air, and you leave a 2-minute message up to 2 minutes long. 325-225-5546. 325 call Jim. That's the number. Also, I'm not going to confuse you by giving the text number. We'll put that on the screen tomorrow. But yeah, you want to call in? You call in. I'll listen to your message. I'll listen to all of them. So that's tomorrow night. And I never went through this. Keith Gross is coming on Thursday. He's written a book called Dirt Roads to Runways, Defending the American Dream for the Next Generation. He's the former assistant state attorney for the state of Florida. Monday, Don Zora, our old friends, making his monthly appearance, intelligence operative and lover of women. He's going to be here. Tuesday, Nils Gravelis. He's a Los Angeles detective. And his publicist told me he's not an investigator, he's a detective. And apparently he's very, very adamant about the difference, but I don't know what the difference is. I'm curious to ask him about it. He's worked on a whole bunch of high-profile cases in Los Angeles, and I used to live there for a while, and I find that place really fascinating, and you do too. And so you'll like that. That's Tuesday the 22nd. Wednesday the 23rd, Francis Menton is coming on. He's also writes a blog on economics called The Manhattan Contrarian out of New York City. This is really interesting. Both him and Spencer are not professional economists. Francis Menton is also a lawyer by trade, retired. And I was not pulling Spencer's chain. I actually like the fact he's not an economist. I think more people need to look at these professions from the outside. I really do, because too many people are caught up on the inner machinations of this crap, and they get so caught up in it they can't see the forest for the trees. I really do think that. Next Thursday, the 24th, Thomas DiLorenzo. He's the president of the Mises Institute, and our old friend Murray Sabrin, economist. He comes on. He's involved with the Mises Institute. This guy runs the Mises Institute. That's an institute. It's a think tank for economics. What's called the Austrian School. Francis Hayek. We got a lot of economic people coming on. I like that, because you need to know about money, because you don't know anything about money, do you? We're the biggest capitalist country in the world, and nobody knows anything about money. But like Spencer said, it's not really a science; it's more of an art, and that's where it gets really. That's where discussion is good, because the thing is, you got to make up your mind for yourself. Because as I said, all right, I'll end the show with a prediction. I think that next year, you give this a year, so let's say May of next year, I think that the Trump tariffs will be generally considered a success, but I'm not guaranteeing it at all. If I had to put my money down, that's how I'd bet. But no, all sorts of things could go wrong. So we'll see. So I want to thank you folks for watching. I want to thank Spencer Morrison for coming on. I will have him back again. He's a man of good humor, and he's Canadian. I didn't press him on that. He said he's lived in Canada most of his life, but he's not Canadian. So I don't understand what's going on there. Maybe next time it comes on, we'll figure that out. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are, and good night to you, wherever you may be. We'll see you tomorrow night, everybody, live, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a nice evening.